Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. Time for yet another show. We got plenty that we could be covering today. I don't know what direction we're going to go. We'll see whether we can continue a little bit. There is, I think, more information to be uncovered from yesterday's AP article, which we got to briefly, about Rick Perry and his involvement in negotiating other less than entirely up and up, possibly, gas deals in Ukraine. I think Rick Perry, on the whole, did a much better job at hewing to the line where the quid pro quos are actually considered within bounds. Although what it does raise, interestingly, is the question of whether or not all of those additional quid pro quos, are they quids pro quo or quid pro quos? I'm not certain. That Republicans refer to as going on all the time in foreign policy. I think these are much more like the ones that Rick Perry pulled off, but it does raise the question of how much of what we do, if looked at under an electron microscope, really turns out to be less than on the up and up, or on less than the up and up, I suppose. So I think we could probably return to that question. Tomorrow begins the open public hearings, and so lots to do in preparation for those. A lot of summation articles about what the various news analyst readers of the now released transcripts have to say are the highlights. Naturally, these are things we'll want to read for ourselves at some point, not all the way through, of course, but see whether anything got missed. We'll turn to some of our non-traditional media I suppose, friends and outlets to see if there's anything that they found in their sift through these things. And we'll see where it takes us from there. There's plenty more to look at and plenty more that, honestly, in a different time might end up at the center of its own investigation. But it may be that the torrent of wrongdoing from out of the Trump administration is just too much to keep pace with. Daily Coast Radio is live now, some say, or we say that Bill says that some say, anyway. So, some say Trump sucks and everything he does is stupid and evil. I said that. Others disagree. For the sake of argument, I'll disagree, so I'll cover both bases. This way we know we're good. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Probably within 2 weeks, maybe less, maybe more. We'll see. You're going to be very, very surprised by what happens, Dad, I can tell you. Okay, time to roll on. Thanks, Bill. Where to go for the morning? Well, there's always the choice between the old tweet stream and back into pocket. I think perhaps Tuesday is for back into pocket. Although before I even get there, I did see this interesting tidbit. Republicans say the darndest things, don't they? They just have such an interesting, they come up with such interesting ways of making excuses so that they can't be they aren't responsible for holding Trump accountable. What is this one? This is a clip from, I don't know, one of the various television talk show programs that The Hill picked up on. Representative Mike Gallagher, I guess in this particular clip, saying, if you serve in the executive branch, you work for the president. If you truly come across something that you feel violates your duty, you feel like you've been given an unlawful order, you can resign. Interesting perspective. I guess this is meant to be aimed at various whistleblowers and those who testified in ways that appeared to have damaged the president in the transcripts recently released. So I just want you to be aware of what you're supposed to do out there, according to Republicans. Now, we are shifting from see something, say something, to see something, turn around and walk the other direction, and don't tell anybody why. So should be pretty good for our national security. We're going to be doing great. Let's see if that gets implemented at the airports anytime soon and whether it makes us all safer or not. That's interesting. I mean, what an incredible turnaround to be whining about having been caught at this stuff. It's just incredible to me that the new standard becomes, look, if you see wrongdoing, just walk away. Someone else will catch it. I don't know who's supposed to catch it. I mean, suppose you work for the federal government. How does he put it? You work for the executive branch. You work for the president. You see something wrong, just resign. So FBI, just resign. You see a crime, just, leave. Everyone will figure it out. Hey, the whole FBI resigned. I wonder why. Can't tell you. Just, you'll have to you'll have to go through the process, interview, get a job with the FBI, train, look at what I looked at, and then you too will resign. And eventually, when the whole country resigns, then, I don't know. Then we don't know what. It still goes on, but we've all resigned. You see, very loudly resigned. And that's an incredible position to be taking. Nothing new in terms of the stupid things Republicans allow themselves to do, but thought I'd throw it out there just to set the tone for the day. All right, let's see. This morning, maybe we'll deal with some of the morning issues, and then back to our AP article and into some of the background. Tuesday will just have to be catch-up day, I think. Hope you all like that. No mustard fans out there? All right. This morning's highly trafficked article from the Washington Post. Trump cites corruption in Kiev and European stinginess to justify actions on Ukraine. Neither rationale withstands close scrutiny. That probably won't come as a surprise to you, but it's always worthwhile to keep up on what the traditional media thinks the average American watching the proceedings in Washington will need to know before going forward. Karen DeYoung, Ellen Nakashima teamed up on this one, published yesterday, late in the evening, 10:15. Look at that. Hard at work in the Washington Post newsroom late into the evening. If President Trump's goal in withholding U.S. aid to Ukraine was the end to end the corruption that had plagued successive governments there, last summer was a curious time to do it. Guess it doesn't hold up. In late May, weeks before Trump ordered nearly $400 million in congressionally approved security assistance frozen, the Defense and State Departments certified that the Ukrainian government had taken, quote, substantial actions toward, quote, decreasing corruption and increasing accountability, and recommended that the aid go forward. This much we already knew, yes? New President Volodymyr Zelensky, whose landslide April victory was followed by the election of an absolute parliamentary majority for his Servant of the People party. Zelensky, quote, had appointed reformist ministers and supported long-stalled anti-corruption legislation. William Taylor, it's Bill Taylor, the Trump-appointed senior U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, testified before the House impeachment inquiry late last month. It wasn't perfect. There were worrisome holdovers from previous governments, and Ukrainian oligarchs remained a powerful force, but things were moving in the right direction. That's according to Vindman, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, in charge of Ukraine for the National Security Council at the White House. When he testified that Republicans suggested that Trump was right to hold up the aid. Okay. That was his response to that. By the way, Vindman also at the center of a side story to all this. He is reportedly being transferred out of his role at the National Security Council. I think that's one of those moves where they actually have some bureaucratic cover for that. You'll recall Vindman is active duty Army, I believe, and he is detailed to the National Security Council on a temporary basis. Sometimes these temporary bases go on for many, many years, and sometimes even across multiple administrations. But eventually, it's not unusual for people to get rotated back. However, I think here you're looking at a story about people in the White House, the Trump White House, who have figured out how to strategically use the leverage and prerogative that the White House has got to make more or less, almost very nearly mimicking standard rotation procedures to say, all right, well, we'd like to get some new blood in here. Maybe it would be might very well be a good idea to get some people with a new perspective in from the various agencies They're there. They're detailed to the White House in the first place in order to bring that additional perspective from the departments into the White House. So on its face, it's not entirely out of the question that it might be a legitimate exercise. On the other hand, the reporting seemed to indicate that an awful lot of people, a wholesale, were being rotated out, which sort of has the hallmark of a Donald Trump slash, perhaps Mick Mulvaney. I would say Stephen Miller, except Stephen Miller is mostly concerned with immigration. But it may be that he wants, he can clean some people out who he disagrees with on that too. But the idea of using semi-legitimate mechanism to clear everyone out wholesale, all the people who are detailed to the White House at once will all go, and we'll bring in an entirely new group. And as I understand the reporting, they are sort of shrinking the size of the National Security Council support staff at the same time. Again, their prerogative. But that too has the hallmark of a Trump move. I want a smaller circle with access to information that could be damaging to me in impeachment hearings going forward. So, as we take a little breakfast beverage sip here, we'll continue on with the Washington Post story about the corruption claims, or the anti-corruption claims going on in the White House. So, as we learned, they had been making progress at the time that Trump decided to withhold this aid. Things were headed in the right direction, according to Vindman. Bill Taylor saying it wasn't perfect, but it was they were making progress. The impeachment inquiry, which moves this week to public hearings, centers on whether Trump abused the power of his office for personal political gain and has obstructed efforts to conceal it. Government witnesses have testified that the security assistance and a promised Zelensky visit to the White House were held hostage to a demand for a public pledge by Zelensky that Ukraine would investigate Joe Biden. You know all about that. Trump also wanted the authorities in Kiev to investigate what was alleged to be Ukrainian involvement in democratic efforts to undermine his 2016 campaign, a conspiracy theory for which no evidence has surfaced. So it's nice of them to finally include that. The president, in his defense, asserts that he was concerned about corruption writ large in Ukraine, not in securing some 2020 election advantage. And if he had circumstantial evidence that would bolster that claim, he'd be in better shape. But unfortunately, he has the opposite, it turns out. In addition, he says he was angered that European allies were not doing enough financially to help the beleaguered country leaving the United States to carry the can. I like that phrase. Corruption is incredible in Ukraine, which bothered me a lot, Trump told reporters early this month. And it also bothered me very, very much that Germany, France, and all of these other countries aren't putting up money. But we're always the sucker that does it. Well, guess what? Neither claim holds up under close scrutiny. While Zelensky expressed appreciation in a July 25th phone call with Trump for years of U.S. aid, security aid, Trump responded by asking for a favor. He pressed Zelensky to look into Biden and the Democrats, advising him to contact the president's personal lawyer, big mistake, Giuliani, and William Barr, Attorney General, for details. Also a mistake, actually. There was almost nobody he could direct him to that wouldn't be a mistake, because it was an illegal request. Trump did not mention any wider concern about overall corruption related to U.S. assistance, the subject that he and senior administration officials now insist was the basis for the sudden holdup after years of steady security aid. European nations have far outpaced the United States in Ukraine. That's also a problem for his claim. Spending $18.3 billion since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and launched an ongoing separatist war in the eastern part of the country that has left at least 13,000 people dead. The bulk of the money, $16.8 billion, came from the European Union, the European Investment Bank, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The rest, $1.5 billion, came bilaterally from the 28 EU countries. Aid has paid for everything from tents and food for refugees to helping train firefighters and paramedics to more esoteric projects such as identifying and protecting old-growth forests in western Ukraine's Carpathian Mountains. The biggest individual European donors were, guess what? Germany, Sweden, Poland, and France. So Germany and France, they don't give any money. They were actually the biggest individual donors on top of the EU's contribution. Outside Europe, Canada has also been a major channel of aid and military training and assistance, and has led Operation Unifier, an international effort to train troops in western Ukraine. By contrast, combined military and non-military assistance from the United States has totaled about $4 billion over the same period. In addition to humanitarian relief and several tranches of billion-dollar loan guarantees for budget stabilization, economic and anti-corruption progress in Ukraine would, quote, not be possible without strong bipartisan support from the United States and very, very strong support from the European Union. Ukrainian Finance Minister Oksana Markarova, perhaps, said at a panel discussion with several officials from the new government held last month at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington. By the way, I did want to make a comment here, something I commented on Twitter yesterday about the importance of the bipartisan support that aid for Ukraine enjoys inside the United States, particularly, of course, in Congress. There was some discussion yesterday. I can't recall the article, but I probably will be able to find it once we look back at the tweet stream here. But some claims, essentially, from the administration, actually from various parts of the executive branch, saying that there were questions asked when the aid got held up. The State Department and the Pentagon were scrambling to examine whether or not they could conclude one way or another, does the president have the authority to do this, to withhold this aid? And, well, they really didn't. He didn't have that authority, and I think it's more than just a gut feeling that people had. I mean, if you think about our reading and discussion of the part of the AP article that we got a chance to look at yesterday, I think that actually hints at some of the answer. Why was it difficult for Perry to navigate? It was more difficult than just simply dictating the terms. Why was it difficult for him to navigate the deal on behalf of the political donors he was trying to help out? And they pointed out that in adopting some of the Western suggested reforms to fight corruption in the gas markets in Ukraine, the drilling rights would only be awarded when they were reviewed by this outside panel, and then the cabinet ministers reviewed the work of this review panel and approved it. In other words, a multi-stage process involving, dozens of experts and outside government experts, industry experts, and accountable government ministers as well. So in other words, the decision was never left in one person's hand. And decisions that are not left in one person's hands, usually this is done for accountability purposes, so that too much power doesn't rest in any one set of hands, because that invites corruption when you do it. And yet, here in the United States, here we were puzzling over, well, should we abide by the Constitution where spending public funds is a complicated process, where there are many hands, many dozens, in fact, many hundreds of hands that can play in the process? You gotta rope together, several hundred votes from elected representatives in a multi-stage process in order to successfully shepherd an appropriations bill through Congress, and indeed a particular line item appropriation. You need to find a congressional champion to bring it up. You need to get somebody to carry that to the Appropriations Committee, to shepherd it through subcommittee work, subcommittee markup, full committee markup, House floor vote, over in the Senate, their own markup process in the committees, their own floor vote process, and then get several hundred votes in the House and a majority, 50 plus votes in the Senate. And then it goes to the president, who has the opportunity, at some level anyway, to veto all of this. It can be vetoed, but then the veto can be overridden. All sorts of things can happen along the way, but you really have to navigate a fairly tricky process in order to get all the way through. Lots of money does get all the way through. Lots of money gets wasted that way or funneled to political allies, no doubt. But it's a difficult process so that it doesn't solely rest in the hands of the president. And here's the president saying, I think, screw all of that. Forget the 435 members of Congress in the House, the 100 in the Senate. Forget the committees. Forget the open and accountable, at least semi-accountable public process, the votes being cast on the floor, the votes being cast in committee. I will be the decider. Well, that invites corruption. And guess what? When you invite corruption and you're talking to Donald Trump, you will get corruption. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. I guess it was Kyle Cheney's tweet yesterday that I was looking at from the testimony of, was it Laura Cooper? She's the senior State Department, or she's the person who was testifying, saying that the senior State Department and Pentagon officials questioned whether the president had the legal authority to block congressionally approved Ukraine aid without notifying Congress. The answer, of course, being no, he does not have that authority. The reason being that the founders and the designers of the Constitution and everybody since who's been brought up in that tradition knows that giving one person unilateral yes-no power over line items in a budget, it simply invites, it's too inviting of corruption, which is also why the line item veto is generally considered to be unconstitutional, frowned upon in constitutional law circles, rejected by the Supreme Court for just that reason. It simply leaves too much leverage in the hands of the president, leverage that the founders, in their wisdom, if you like to say, frame things in such terms, that they delegated to the Congress. It's precisely so that there would be multiple hands on the purse strings, representing wide variety of viewpoints. And for those who saw past Madison's pie in the sky hope, I guess, that the United States would not fracture into faction, would receive the blessing of the major parties as well. But that brings us back full circle, I guess, on this little departure. Why was it so important, as many of the witnesses in their depositions said, that Ukraine not venture into United States domestic politics, that it maintain its bipartisan support in Congress? We just sort of gloss past that. We breezed by that as a good thing. Still, after all these years, trained as we are, both in American political tradition and in resistance to that and critical examination of American political institutions, we still glide past the assertion, the naked assertion that having bipartisan support is a good thing, something that would be desirable for the government of Ukraine. But by way of explaining it, yes, that's because the process that we've set up for ourselves to avoid corruption here in the United States is one which requires the cooperation, or at least the tacit blessing, of some portion of both parties inside Congress, so that you can navigate this delicate process where so many people with so many varying motivations have the tools available quite easily to blow up an appropriation. It pays for Ukraine to be on good terms with both parties in the United States, and allowing the president to unilaterally step inside of the system and upend it threatens all of that. Here you are taught, look, play nice with both sides, keep things civil, as our civility police are always trying to remind us, right? Because if you do, then it becomes impossible, quote unquote impossible, for one person like the president, even if you anger or somehow displease the President of the United States, that personal problem isn't going to stand in the way of you getting an appropriation that the Congress as a whole, with all of its factions, has actually worked out, has actually fashioned and handed over to the President. The President's leverage to stop it is minimal. He can veto the entire funding bill and put everybody's funding in jeopardy just to get at you. And under normal circumstances, no president would do that, but we don't have a normal president. He might do that. Or he has limited ability elsewhere in the process to delay or perhaps even temporarily block these things, but not without informing Congress, whose job it is to dispatch that money for this reason. Then they would be able to press back, push on him, and figure out what this problem is and find out whether it's legitimate or not. If it's legitimate and something that can be addressed, they'll address it. If it's not legitimate and it's for personal political gain, well then, that would become immediately apparent. Okay, so I know that was a little bit of a detour from the article, but I think an important point that comes out of this and yesterday's reading and things that we'll get on to later on as well, but important reminder of the basic building blocks, the basic political theory behind the importance of bipartisan support for Ukraine or any other country when dealing with the United States. Because otherwise, how would other states conduct their foreign policy with respect to any country, really, but especially the United States, where we were having this problem? You could, what do you do as Ukraine, knowing that in 4 or 8 years the administration can change? It can change in partisan control. A different person is likely to be in charge at some point. How do you conduct foreign policy long term without being able to depend on the stability that brings? Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, we can get back on track here, I think, with the Washington Post article, but I hope that made some sense to you. I guess long story short there, the idea to keep in mind is that staying out of internal politics and not picking sides as between the two parties is wise foreign policy for any other country, not just to avoid what I guess still most people think of as a bad thing, meddling in the internal politics of other countries. Yes, the United States does it all the time. Yes, we might be doing that in, I guess, Bolivia currently is the big story in the news we haven't really touched on. But in an ideal world, this sort of thing doesn't happen. I mean, I guess it happens on the part of the United States a little more often because the United States is a big giant bull in a china shop, and it stands in different relationship to most of these other countries in which it meddles than most other countries stand to the United States. Being superpower that it is doesn't justify it, it just makes it possible. No value judgment at the moment on whether or not it's right or wrong. I mean, okay, here's one. It's wrong. But okay. No, we're not going to be addressing that subject at the moment. But the idea here is it makes for a more stable set of more stable arena of international relations, a more stable world order, if you will, for other countries to recognize, look, partisan control of the office of the presidency of the United States can and will change hands. Same with the partisan control of Congress. And it doesn't make any sense for us to try and either redirect that or assume that it'll never change, and therefore make for closer, overtly closer relationships with one party or another, because, well, we may find ourselves punished at some time in the future when things do change in terms of partisan control, and we don't want that to happen to us. Of course, it was Trump's plan, and it's always been sort of the Republican plan. Well, I think we can, if you cheat with us and do this thing, which you're not supposed to do, we'll have a better shot at guaranteeing that partisan control doesn't change hands and you don't ever suffer because the Democrats have taken over. And P.S., the Democrats are less likely to take their frustrations out on you by punishing your country by withholding aid when everyone can see that you need it. Now, we, on the other hand, are that vindictive. We will actually do that to you. We don't care about your people, and we don't care about the fact that ordinary people in your country will suffer for the supposed sins of your leadership. We will do that to you. But it's, in the long term, better for everyone else in in any other country to to refrain from interfering in that way, because not only is it good for them, but supposedly the American system, the Western system of accountability, transparency, multiple layers of control, multiple hands on the wheel for the control of policy and the spending of money, is also likewise in turn supposed to stabilize things for all the rest of these countries too, and keep things on an even keel. And countries are supposed to be able to depend on the United States political leadership not exercising on a whim these personal notions of retribution against political enemies in other countries or people who won't do you favors. That's not supposed to be able to be held over your head. If you don't do us this favor, the president will block your funding. Well, if you understand the American political system correctly and the American political system is running correctly, the president just doesn't have that much leverage to do that. He can go to Congress and lobby for his position for the next year's appropriation to be eliminated or withheld or lessened, but that'll be a public process that you have the opportunity to counter with your own agents, your own lobbyists, in an open and clear and transparent process. Take that away, and you don't know how to approach dealing with the United States, the largest superpower in the world, and that's going to put you at a distinct disadvantage. It pays to stay neutral. It was good advice. All right, back to the article where we had just found out about Trump being full of it in terms of his claims that the rest of the world, and Europe in particular, doesn't do its share in supporting Ukraine, and that he was withholding the money specifically because he was super worried about corruption. Apparently neither of these claims hold up. We got proof, or at least some evidence offered with respect to the value of aid from Europe. Continuing on, even as it favorably and inaccurately compares U.S. assistance to that of Europe, the administration has also congratulated itself on support for Ukraine in comparison to that of former President Barack Obama. Total figures of annual foreign and military aid, however, have been similar through the two administrations, although Trump decided in late 2017 to allow lethal defensive weaponry, while Obama-era aid included many of the non-lethal defense items also on the current assistance list. Obama had rejected appeals from within his own administration to include lethal defense items on the grounds that it would escalate the conflict with Russia. Then Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko had pressed for delivery of sophisticated Javelin anti-tank weapons since 2015. A bipartisan majority in Congress was critical of Obama's hesitation, and in 2016 passed legislation backing such weaponry, but Obama was unmoved. In 2017, senior Trump national security officials agreed that a package of lethal aid to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression, including a $47 million grant to finance the purchase of 210 Javelin missiles, would be a smart move. But they had trouble persuading the president, who, like Obama, was reluctant to cross Russian President Vladimir Putin, and who also had a reticence to providing anything for free, a former U.S. official recalled. All right, well, that's a unique, an idiosyncrasy of the way Trump does things. Then National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster had a PowerPoint presentation drawn up explaining how the javelins were defensive weapons and would be highly effective against the superior Russian military, the official said. Although Trump approved the shift to lethal aid in December of that year, agreement on the javelins was delayed for a week. Money for the javelins, as is normal in such transactions, was paid directly to Raytheon, the system's manufacturer, by the United States. Although Ukrainian troops were trained to operate them, the javelins have not been deployed. They are in a warehouse about 1,000 miles from the front lines as a symbol of U.S. support. Trump first raised a conspiracy theory about Ukrainian interference in the 2016 presidential election just 3 months after taking office. I didn't realize it went that far back. He periodically returned to the subject, suggesting, despite the opposite conclusions of the U.S. intelligence community, that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that had interfered, and that it was to benefit Hillary Clinton, not him. This year, Congress approved nearly $400 million in combined defense and state security funding to Ukraine, similar to what was authorized last year and part of the uninterrupted flow of aid that had continued through two administrations since 2014. The aid package drawn up by the two departments included sniper rifles, rocket-propelled grenade launchers, and counter-artillery radars, electronic warfare detection and secure communications facilities, and training support. Although Ukraine had asked for an additional shipment of javelins, they were to be paid for with Ukraine's own funds rather than U.S. assistance. But when the official U.S. delegation to Zelensky's May 21st inauguration returned to Washington with high hopes for the new government and U.S.-Ukraine relations, they found Trump in a foul mood. The president started the May 23rd meeting, quote, with kind of a negative assessment of the Ukraine. It's a terrible place, all corrupt, terrible people. Kurt Volker, the administration's special envoy to Ukraine, testified before the impeachment inquiry. That is to say, he said that Trump said that about Ukraine. According to official testimony and reports from Ukraine, the White House began to press for a public statement by Zelensky pledging to investigate the Bidens and the Democrats. The pressure that was transmitted to the new government by Taylor, Volker, and Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the EU, who recently amended his impeachment testimony to agree that the conditions for getting aid and White House visit were clear. That is to say, he used the dumb Latin quid pro quo. In mid-July, as a September 30th deadline for approving the fiscal year's security assistance to Ukraine was approaching, those working on the issue for the White House were told without explanation that it was being held up on Trump's orders by the OMB. After meetings at increasingly high levels through mid-August, at which there was unanimous agreement of all agencies that the aid should go forward, Vindman testified that he was asked to draft a presidential decision memo for Defense Secretary Mark Esper, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and John Bolton, the president's national security advisor, reflecting their, quote, consensus views to release the funding, to present to the president for a decision. Their meeting with Trump took place on August 16th. Vindman testified that he was given conflicting reports of its outcome, saying that the issue wasn't raised, or that it was raised, but the president didn't act on the recommendation. It was not until late August that A Story in Politico publicly revealed the aid freeze, sparking strong bipartisan pushback by lawmakers. Well, I don't know how strong it was, but okay, it happened. In quick succession, in early September, a whistleblower complaint raising concerns about the Trump-Zelensky call was making its way through the government. Bolton left his White House job. The Senate prepared a bipartisan resolution rebuking Trump for withholding the aid. The September 30th end of the fiscal year approached, and with it, the possibility that authorization for the aid would expire. Then on September 11th, the administration notified Congress that the security assistance hold had been lifted. Whether it actually had or not, I still think open question. Whether the aid made it there, open question. At any rate, that is the end of the article. Good background information, once again, for understanding the political science behind why the Ukraine situation raises such an issue. I mean, we've examined the quid pro quo side. We've examined whether or not that is in fact extortion and bribery. We've examined whether or not there's obstruction of justice and whether or not there's a cover-up of the activities of some sort, which is just another way of saying obstruction of justice. All of this is true, but just, I thought, wise at some point, particularly if they're going to be throwing so many stupid and confusing sounding defenses in the path of this impeachment inquiry, to go back to the basics and examine, why is it again that they shouldn't be interfering in American politics? Not just because there are politics. Hands off. I mean, we're guilty of that ourselves, but that's not reason enough to allow it from others necessarily. You just say, here, we'll say two wrongs don't make a right. Everyone knows that. But beyond that, the political science of why it makes better sense for everyone to keep their hands off of situations that might unduly influence the domestic politics of, unilaterally, of the United States. Why it's a bad idea. That's a bad idea to do that everywhere. Generally speaking, yes. But in real politic, we're not going to get there anytime soon. So don't get hung up hoping for our reciprocating on that. Not likely to happen. Okay. Other items of interest here. Another big story, unrelated, I think, to Ukraine, but just another area of problematic corruption, essentially. Politico with a story widely shared this morning. Federal health contract funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars to Trump allies. How about that? Let's see. Campaign and White House veterans, the subheader says, were among 40 PR consultants on a $2.25 million contract. That is a lot of money to you and me, but I guess in government terms, rather a piddling amount. But if it only gets stuffed in 3 or 4 pockets, maybe, maybe that's not so bad. Split among 40. I don't know how irregular that really is, but let's see we'll see what they're going on about over at Politico. Dan Diamond and Adam Cankren. I'm not certain how he pronounces his last name. I never am. I don't know why I offer it up. I like to try to give some credit, but sometimes it's maybe it's not worth doing. Go read it and credit them in your own head without pronouncing it out loud. Okay. At least 8 former White House presidential transition and campaign officials for Donald Trump were hired as outside contractors, not surprising, to the Federal Health Department at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, according to documents newly obtained by Politico. They were among at least 40 consultants who worked on a 1-year, $2.25 million contract directed by Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Seema Verma. Never really heard of anything good coming out of her office. The contractors were hired to burnish Verma's personal brand and provide strategic communications support. They charged up to $380 per hour for work traditionally handled by dozens of career civil servants in CMS's communications department. In other words, you're not entirely without support for these things. Everyone recognizes, I don't know if they would go so far as to put it in terms of burnishing a personal brand, but certainly PR for the department and the department head is not outside of the ordinary course of expenses for federal agencies. So they keep staff on hand to take care of it. But in addition, I guess they didn't rely on them, or in addition to relying on them, decided that $2.25 million was money well spent, especially if you were paying people who were friends of Trump to provide that information, or better yet, to not provide any information at all, but just simply to take money from the federal government. Let's see what Politico has to say here. The arrangement allowed the Trump allies to cycle through the federal government's opaque contracting system, charging hefty fees with little public oversight or accountability, which is, of course, what we were just talking about. It's important that there be that kind of transparency and accountability. However, I guess one of the real concessions we'd have to make to real-world conditions is so many people are getting paid in so many different ways under so many different contracts that even when they're open and transparent, there's simply too much information for ordinary citizens to process. At any point, we have to sort of rely on watchdog groups to call out the more egregious examples from time to time, or I guess in this case, Politico. But they serve the same function, watchdog groups and the press, when everything's working correctly, right? Over a 4.5-month stretch from September 2018 to January, the contractors collectively billed at least $744,000. The Department of Health and Human Services halted the contract in April in the face of widespread criticism after Politico reported on Verma's extensive use of communications consultants. It didn't exactly set the world on fire, but I guess it did the trick, right? But under the terms hammered out last year, revealed for the first time, CMS agreed to allow at least 4 consultants to bill up to $204,000 over the length of the contract. That included one longtime Verma ally, Marcus Barlow, her spokesperson, while she was an Indiana-based consultant to then Governor Mike Pence, who was green-lighted to bill as much as $425,000 for about a year's worth of work. Those are far higher rates than for the department's regular communications staff and even the agency's top political appointees. Senior career officials in the CMS Communications Department were paid about $140,000 last year. HHS Secretary Alex Azar's annual salary is $203,500, the spokesperson said. Just happens that Mike Pence's friend Marcus Barlow took $425,000. Politico obtained roughly 200 pages of billing documents, which were prepared by HHS in response to a congressional oversight request from a former House staffer, and confirmed the authenticity of the files with multiple sources. The GOP consultants mostly worked as subcontractors through Nahigian Strategies, a communications firm that's hired multiple veterans of the Republican Party and GOP campaigns. The firm was brought in by Trump officials under the umbrella of public relations giant Porter Novelli, which has long maintained a slew of contracts with the federal government. That's true. Nahigian Strategies. Who cares? I hope I'm pronouncing it wrong because they sound rotten. I don't know. Anyway, it's run by brothers Ken Nahigian, who led the Trump transition team in early 2017. Does that help? Does anyone remember how he pronounces that? And Keith Nahigian, Nahigian, by the way, who has worked for multiple Republican presidential campaigns. Over a 4-month period reviewed by Politico, Nahigian Strategies collectively charged $275,565 for a range of strategic communications duties, and the brothers themselves billed roughly $56,970 for their personal services at a $379.80 hourly rate. By the way, how does that work out? How many hours are they saying they put in at that point? I'm just curious. I don't know. 56,970 divided by $379.80. It's 150 hours over the year. And I guess the 2 of them were on the case. So about 75 hours a year. That's not a whole lot of work, and that is a whole lot of money, I guess. But you would have been able to predict that from the $380 an hour rate, I guess. Still, just sort of interesting to go through the math. The contractors brought in by the Nahigians include Brad Rateike, R-A-T-E-I-K-E, an advisor to Trump's 2016 campaign and former White House communications official, before leaving the administration in July of 2018. Like many people, and across multiple administrations, I guess. People come in, work in the administration for long enough to get the credentials to burnish their resumes and say, as a former White House official, I can now charge $380 an hour instead of $280 an hour, and then just move on and do the same work, but for twice the pay through private contractors, who are, of course, brought in to do government work because they do so much more efficiently and for less, because private sector, you see. You know how that goes. All right. The contractors brought in include this Brad Radke, I don't know how he pronounces that guy, Let's see. So he was in the administration till July 2018. 6 months later, this guy, Radke, billed roughly $1,150 for just 3.5 hours work as an outside consultant. Good work if you can get it. Maggie Mulvaney, a Republican fundraiser. Check out that last name, if you will. Maggie Mulvaney, a Republican fundraiser, charged more than $2,500 for a stint as a contractor in October of 2018. She has since joined the Trump re-election campaign. Zachary Lamb, who staffed the advance team for Trump's 2016 run, billed $7,388.52 that same month. Not huge amounts of money, but essentially an opportunity for bit players in the campaigns to, basically duck in, put in, quote unquote, 3 hours worth of work and run away with what for most people is, a month or 2 or even 3 worth of salary. And in the case of the $56,000 billed by the Nahigians, a whole year's worth of salary for 75 hours each, maybe, if they even did that work. Taylor Mason, a Nahigian Strategies employee who was formerly a regional press secretary for Trump's inaugural committee, accounted for at least $54,900 in charges for 4 months of work in late 2018 and early 2019. Lynn Hatcher, former intern for Mike Pence before joining Nahigian Strategies, and Justin Caporali, who was a top aide in the Trump White House, was he? Briefly worked on behalf of CMS after leaving the White House. So you leave, you do a couple hours for Nahigian Strategies, you make $5,000, $10,000, and then you leave. Pam Stevens, who did 2 short stints in the Trump administration, was brought into CMS as an independent consultant through Porter Novelli. The firm billed CMS roughly $280 an hour for Stevens, a longtime GOP media advisor who specializes in promoting Republican women. Radke, Mulvaney, Lamb, Mason, and Hatcher didn't respond to a request for comment. Caporali declined a request as well, so he responded but said no. Stevens referred all questions to CMS, as did Porter Novelli. Nahigian Strategies President Keith Nahigian said in a statement, "Our decades-long experience working as a GSA-qualified subcontractor to more than a dozen federal agencies, including HHS and CMS, is nonpartisan and spans Republican and Democratic administrations." I'm sure it does. "And those familiar with our work know the exceptional quality and expertise of our team and the skills of our partners." CMS called its use of contractors appropriate and in line with longstanding practices, contending in a statement that it did not have the in-house staff needed to carry out an ambitious messaging campaign promoting Verma's policy priorities for the agency. You all know what they are, though, because of the effectiveness of the campaign, right? Okay. All right. The rest of the article appears to be, do we get more detail here? For the moment, it's them justifying it and others saying, for instance, the agency's heavy reliance on contractors spanning nearly 2 years and drawing on multiple political operatives alarmed current and former CMS officials and government ethics experts who questioned the appearance and justification for outsourcing a substantial portion of the agency's communications duties. "It's the classic revolving door," said Scott Amy, who leads investigations into government contracts for the Project on Government Oversight. Additionally, the number of consultants with ties to the White House or the Trump campaign raises concerns. Verma, who herself previously worked as an independent consultant, has played a central and controversial role in crafting the Trump administration's health agenda as its top official in charge of Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act. And of course, she is a fierce advocate for, as she says, cutting waste in federal health spending. Verma has championed efforts to tie Medicaid benefits to employment, unwind parts of Obamacare, and loosen insurance coverage requirements, and has taken on an increasingly political role as a prominent critic of Democratic health proposals like Medicare for All. That, of course, has won her praise from conservatives within the White House, but Democrats and the broader healthcare community have sharply criticized her policy priorities as designed, believe it or not, to cut benefits and patient protections. Yes, okay, so no surprises there. Nahigian's strategies became intertwined with the health department over the first 2 years of the administration, helping coordinate Verma's communication strategies, write her speeches, that they definitely have staff for, right? Helping coordinate Verma's, helping manage events and set up interviews, according to 4 people familiar with their operations. Even before the strategic communications contract took effect in September of 2018, Nahigian Strategies had served as a subcontractor in earlier arrangements, according to emails and separate contracting documents obtained through FOIA requests, during which it played a key role in shaping Verma's messages and handling her interactions with the press. Verma directed the subcontracts with Nahigian Strategies, said 2 people with knowledge of her strategy, in part because she wanted to assemble a team that included Barlow, whom she'd initially sought to hire as her communications director. But I guess she wasn't paying enough, so he wanted double the money, so guess what? We'll do it as a contractor job. Barlow, who previously worked for a series of Indiana Republicans, had served as a spokesperson for Verma's own health policy consulting firm, SVC Incorporated, prior to her appointment to Trump's health department. But Barlow was blocked from following Verma into CMS after the White House found out he'd written a column in an Indianapolis newspaper calling Trump offensive and ignorant and vowing never to support him in the run-up to the 2016 election. So maybe that's interesting too, all by itself. Never Trumpers. How do never Trumpers pay the bills when Donald Trump controls the purse strings and does so on a basis of personal feelings and jealousies? And the answer is by paying them as subcontractors instead. And you wonder whether Trump maybe has a grudging respect for this kind of grift. I respect the fact that you are able to squeeze money out of the government, and not me personally, so I'm okay with it, by working around me, by fooling me this way. What good grift. You might be a good guy after all. I wonder if he thinks that. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. A little bit late getting the mute button to turn off there. A quick review of what remains of the article, and there is a substantial part here. I think we can probably just sum things up with the end of this section, which basically alleges here that instead of being able to, and this is interesting, so he gets blocked, Barlow does, from joining the administration directly and getting paid $180,000 to $200,000 as Verma's chief of staff because he was a never Trumper. Instead, and I don't know, like I said, I can't figure out whether I think Trump would have a grudging respect for this if he knew about it, but he almost certainly didn't. But instead, Barlow works around it. I don't know who's greasier in all this. Is it Trump, who says, no, I won't allow taxpayer funds to be used to pay this never Trumper because I'm personally angry at him? You're not allowed to pay him nearly $200,000. Instead, you have a situation where he's getting paid $400,000, and it's also taxpayer money. It's just being paid to him as a contractor. So he gets twice as much money having been rejected as a never Trumper. On the other hand, there's the other side of the equation. What do you make of the never Trumper who says, no, I refuse to acknowledge, he's terrible. How did he put it? What was the actual wording? I don't know if I can come up with it again. But anyway, he basically says he should be nowhere near government. But meanwhile, he becomes president, and Barlow says, well, maybe I would take $200,000. I'll be helping Seema Verma, who I know is, and okay, I respect her, even though she's not necessarily worthy of any respect, but I'd be working for her, so I would take $200,000 a year to do that. Oh, I can't have it because Trump blacklisted me. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, I guess if the person was willing to take $200,000 to swallow his pride and subsume his principles that had made him a never Trumper, he'd certainly be he'd be willing to take $400,000 to do it, that's a no-brainer. Obviously, I would take twice as much money to do it. Plus, I get to distance myself even further by being a contractor. So anyway, it says here, so instead, Barlow became a highly paid shadow staffer, helping write Verma's speeches, providing strategic advice, and even screening potential CMS hires. First as an employee of Nahigian Strategies and later as an independent consultant when he decided he wanted to keep all of that money. According to his billing records and multiple people familiar with the workings of the department. Between September 2018 and January, Barlow billed CMS for more than $150,000 as an independent consultant. And, of course, then wouldn't answer any questions about it. I think, though, that we'll probably stop with this story at this point. Basically, the more Politico revealed about it, the less Nahigian was willing to do and the less CMS was willing to do to continue the contracts until finally, when the whistle was blown entirely, they began to wind this practice down. All right, let's see. We have some suggestions from listeners as well for different directions. Let me sort through all of these. Okay. Oh, Greg actually informs me back channel here that the Supreme Court will let the lawsuit go forward against gun maker. I guess that's isn't that which is the manufacturer that's based in Newtown, right there in Trump's hometown. Yeah, sorry about that, Greg. I confused it with Trump there for a second. Is that weird? In Greg's hometown. But the maker of the guns that were used in the school shooting, of course. And so I guess that's interesting news. Let lawsuit go forward. I guess there was some sort of appeal to see whether they could dismiss the suit entirely under the various protections that federal law has afforded to gun manufacturers. So I guess that's good news, and we'll examine that and no doubt discuss it at least briefly tomorrow. Let's see. There is also this interesting. Here we have a problem here. If I take everyone's suggestion, Kate Sherrill has sent me an article. So has B.J. Hutch, our Montreal girl, has sent me something. Both are from Politico. Do we give this much airtime to Politico and its work? Let's see. With respect to Kate's story, I can at least make brief mention of this. She sends along the very interesting tweet. I did see this yesterday from Julia Davis, who is a Twitter famous Russia watcher. Her tweet, supported by Politico's coverage of Laura Cooper's now released testimony in her deposition, says that, among other things, Trump reportedly called Bolton, John Bolton, at home to complain about a CNN story that said the Navy was pushing back against Russian aggression in the Black Sea. That bothered him. I heard a story on CNN. Listen, John, I heard a story on CNN that says the United States Navy is pushing back against Russian aggression in the Black Sea. I'm very worried about this. And I didn't call him and say, are we in over our heads? Can we support these guys? Do we need to dispatch another battle group? Something like that? No. Apparently, when CNN portrayed the move as a response to Russia, the White House, that would be Donald Trump, told the Navy to cancel the maneuver. Apparently, they must have had some group moving in or near the Black Sea to keep the Russians in check there and let them know that we were watching and don't be aggressive in the Black Sea. And Donald Trump, nobody's been tougher on Russia than Donald Trump, says cancel it. Just as the North Koreans were upset about joint maneuvers with the South Koreans, and we canceled those. Russia didn't even express any opposition, I guess, as far as I can tell, although I haven't read the articles yet. But all it is Trump inherently understanding that this would bother Russia, and so therefore, let's not do it. Very interesting. Also, again, so tough on Russia he is. Now, let's see. B.J. Hutch sends us another Politico article asking, what say you about this? there's a surprisingly plausible path to removing Trump from office. That's the claim of this and the headline of this Politico article. That's up our alley. Let's take a look. What are we looking at? Juliana Glover's piece, subtitled here, it would take just 3 Republican senators to turn the impeachment vote into a secret ballot. It's not hard to imagine what would happen then. I don't think I know that process. Let's take a look. Okay. Juliana Glover, by way of information here, provided in italics immediately below, has worked as an advisor for several Republican politicians, including George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, John Ashcroft, and Rudy Giuliani, and advised the presidential campaigns of John McCain and Jeb Bush. Plausibly a never-Trumper, with the anomaly of Rudy Giuliani in there. But none of them are good people. So, grain of salt, as we take all advice from never-Trumpers with. By most everyone's judgment, the Senate will not vote to remove President Donald Trump from office if the House impeaches him. But what if senators could vote on impeachment by secret ballot? I know that has been suggested, or it has been suggested from anonymous quotes from senators, mostly, that if the vote were taken by secret ballot, perhaps there would be more votes to remove him. I don't know whether it would ever amount to enough votes to remove him, but political pressure being what it is, otherwise not a real possibility. But I didn't know that they could do this. What is the argument here? If they didn't have to face backlash from constituents or the media or the president himself, who knows how many Republican senators would vote to remove? A secret impeachment ballot might sound crazy. It does, as a matter of fact, but it's actually quite possible. In fact, it would take only 3 senators to allow for that possibility. Are they saying to hold the impeachment trial as a closed executive session of the Senate? That might be what they're talking about. I don't think that would go over very well. But, I mean, if it resulted in the removal of the president, that's a decapitating blow. I don't know what the public does with that. All right. Let's read first. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said he will immediately move to hold a trial to adjudicate the articles of impeachment if and when the Senate receives them from the House of Representatives. Still not sure I believe that, by the way. Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution does not set many parameters for the trial, except to say that the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. That means the Senate has sole authority to draft its own rules for the impeachment trial without judicial or executive branch oversight. Okay, I'm in agreement to this point. During the last impeachment of a president, Bill Clinton, the rules were hammered out by Democrats and Republicans in a collaborative process, as then Senate leaders Trent Lott and Tom Daschle recently pointed out in a Washington Post op-ed. The rules passed unanimously. That's unlikely this time, given the polarization that now defines our politics. McConnell and his fellow Republicans are much more likely to dictate the rules with little input from Democrats. But according to the current Senate procedure, McConnell will still need a simple majority, 51 of the 53 Senate Republicans, to support any resolution outlining the rules governing the trial. I mean, it doesn't all have to come from Republicans, but if they drew up a partisan set of rules that was unlikely to garner any Democratic support, he would need 51 out of the 53 Senate Republicans to adopt the rules. That means that if only 3 Republican senators were to break from the caucus, they could block any rule they didn't like. Vice President Mike Pence can't break ties in impeachment matters. I think we actually may have read that at some point. Although, actually, that might be something that I read back in back when the more pressing issue was the impeachment of George W. Bush. Anyway, those 3 senators, in turn, could demand a secret ballot and condition their approval of the rest of the rules on getting one. I mean, you could make that demand. I'm not sure where it goes, not just politically, but constitutionally. Some might say transparency in congressional deliberations and votes is inviolable. And it's true that none of the previous Senate impeachments have been conducted via secret ballot. But The Senate's role in an impeachment is analogous to a U.S. jury, where secret ballots are often used. When Electoral College gridlock has resulted in the House picking the president, the House elected Thomas Jefferson in 1800 and John Quincy Adams in 1824. That vote has been secret. That is interesting. That would absolutely not fly now. Not that I think this other secret ballot would fly now either, but that would be a real anomaly to try and reproduce that. And of course, when citizens vote for president, they do so in private. Some do for profit, that is true, depending on who wins. Trump and those around him seem confident that he won't lose the 20 Republican senators needed to block a guilty verdict. That's likely true. But it's not hard to imagine 3 senators supporting a secret ballot. I don't know. 5 sitting Republican senators have already announced their retirements. 4 of those are in their mid-70s or older and will never run for office again. They might well be willing to demand secrecy in order to give cover to their colleagues who would like to convict Trump but are afraid to do so because of politics in their home districts. There are also 10 Republican senators who aren't up for re-election until 2024 and who might figure Trumpism will be irrelevant by then. Senators Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski have been the most vocal Republicans in expressing concerns about Trump's behavior toward Ukraine. Other GOP senators, and I got to get back to calling them GOP senators, have recently softened in their defense of him as well, all before the House has held any public hearings. There's already been some public speculation that should the Senate choose to proceed with a secret ballot, Trump would be found guilty. GOP strategist Mike Murphy said recently that a sitting Republican senator had told him 30 of his colleagues would vote to convict Trump if the ballot were secret. Former Senator Jeff Flake topped that, saying he thought 35 Republicans would vote that way. I don't know. While it's unlikely Trump would support a secret ballot, he wouldn't have any say in it, I don't think. It's possible he might actually benefit from one in the long run. Wow. Okay. If a secret ballot is agreed on and Trump knows the prospect of impeachment is near, he could then focus his energies on his post-presidency. Once he leaves office, Trump faces multiple possible criminal investigations at the federal, state, and local level. Local, you think? He almost certainly knows that a President Pence could pardon him only for federal crimes. To avoid the prospect of serving time, Trump could negotiate a collective settlement, just as the Sackler family has done on the OxyContin matter, with all the jurisdictions now running independent investigations into his activities. Trump's impeachment, followed by a quick resignation, might appease Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance and New York Attorney General Letitia James's thirst for justice, making them more likely to agree to a deal. Vance, maybe. Even McConnell might privately welcome the prospect of a secret ballot. He has always been intently focused on maintaining his Republican majorities in the Senate. Trump's approval numbers continue to languish and support for impeachment has been rising. McConnell himself, facing re-election next year, has an approval rating of just 18% in Kentucky, not to mention that the Republican governor there just suffered a stunning upset in last week's election, all of which suggests McConnell might warm to the possibility that he and his caucus could avoid a public up or down vote in defense of behavior by the president that's looking increasingly indefensible. A secret ballot might get Trump out of office sooner than everyone expects. The sooner any 3 Republican senators make clear that they will support nothing short of a secret ballot, the sooner Trump realizes his best course could be to cut a deal, trading his office for a get-out-of-jail-free card, a clean slate from prosecutors, just as Vice President Spiro Agnew did. And if Trump were to leave office before the end of the year, there might even be enough time for Republicans to have a vibrant primary fight, resulting in a principled Republican as the nominee. What say I? I say likely fantasy across the board, but I encourage such speculation. It's always interesting to do that, and always interesting, always valuable to remind everybody, with a determined majority, a lot of the precedents and rules can simply be dispensed with. If you have 51 votes, you can wave away almost anything. On the other hand, I guess these rules would be adopted by the Senate before the start of the trial. They would have to be, right? So at that point, the Chief Justice isn't presiding. is there any opportunity for the Chief Justice to weigh in after those rules are adopted in a way that would invalidate the decision to use a secret ballot? Because honestly, I don't think that's in keeping with intended practice, but it does make a good point. One of the more interesting points here is, again, if you're going to analogize to a trial with the Senate sitting as the jury does vote, well, it's not entirely secret. I mean, your votes are known to inside the jury room, although I guess inside the jury room, can you vote by secret ballot there? And can the chairman of the, can the foreman of the jury collect the votes by, secret paper ballot? Or does it have to be in polling the jurors? I don't actually know what the answer is on that. On the other hand, I know that from my own long past service on a civil case jury, we made our decisions in private, of course, just among the jury, although my recollection is that inside the jury room, it was not a secret, but that after the verdict was rendered, of course, the attorneys had the right to poll the jury. And we, as members of the jury, had to own up publicly in the courtroom as to what our voting preference on the verdict was. And that was a big surprise to me at the time. And I didn't have any idea, and they didn't tell us that there was any possibility of that happening. And as I recall, it was, it was a civil case of, I barely remember the details of the case, but I was somewhat skeptical of the plaintiff's claims. But ultimately, I was willing to, it was a suit against the plaintiff's landlord for personal injury. And I was willing at the end to say, all right, well, I believe there's some compensation due, but I'm not entirely convinced that the plaintiff is telling the straight story on this. So I cast my vote accordingly, and we delivered our verdict. And I guess we didn't have to have a unanimous verdict in this case. And then when the request was made to poll the jury of how they had voted, I was like, what? I was really surprised, and I was, not entirely pleased about having to tell everybody in open court in front of the plaintiff that I didn't believe him. But I mean, okay, that wasn't my responsibility. That's how I felt. I voted that way. And so there you go. I answered the question. So anyway, that's sort of an analogy to if you're going to analogize to a jury situation, then realize that in many, most, some, all, I don't know, courtrooms, the counsel would have the right to poll the jury afterwards, and so you'd be on the record anyway. So I don't know whether this holds up. Not to mention that I don't know how much support there really would be for that in the rules. It's good theory, and it's a good question, and like I said, it's also a good read of the situation. How many Republican senators would it take to block a rules package for the impeachment proceeding and demand something, whether it was a secret ballot or anything else? I don't know what it would end up being, but that's worth thinking about. I would take that away, is that 3 Republican senators could get together and insist on a certain provision being included or excluded from the rules, whatever that might be, whether it's secret ballot or something else, worth keeping in mind and worth seeing if there's anything to leverage there. So, okay, thanks to both of you for contributing those articles to our reading of the day. Let's see. Back over to Pocket. Boy, things are really getting... The change in the weather is making things even more difficult here for keeping the voice clear as we move through today's stories. Let's see. Other things worth pointing out here, maybe even before returning to the story of Rick Perry, and we might not even get to that. There are, as you know, many more other things. This news I saw reported by The Hill yesterday in Twitter, where so much of my news comes through. Judge sides with New York officials in Trump tax return lawsuit. Naomi Jagoda, maybe Yagoda, is the writer on that piece for The Hill. A federal judge on Monday dismissed 2 New York officials from President Trump's lawsuit over his state tax returns. It's a little bit unclear exactly what's happening here, but I think we can explain it. Judge Carl Nichols, a Trump appointee in federal district court in Washington, ruled that the D.C.-based court doesn't have jurisdiction over the New York officials. This would be Attorney General Letitia James and state tax official Michael Schmidt. Mr. Trump bears the burden of establishing personal jurisdiction, but his allegations do not establish that the District of Columbia's long-arm statute is satisfied here with respect to either defendant, Nichols wrote. The long-arm statute would be, that's the term for the statute that helps establish jurisdiction in local court. Well, not local court, federal court based in this locality or any locality. Lots of jurisdictions have their own, everyone has their own long-arm statute. If you're suing somebody in federal court in Washington, D.C., the court will only take the case if they have jurisdiction over all parties to the case. They have jurisdiction over, I guess, Donald Trump's claims because he's serving as president working here in Washington, D.C. He's suing, I don't know under what theory he was presenting here, but he was basically saying, I ought to have the ability to sue in Washington, D.C. against Letitia James and Michael Schmidt here in D.C. because, sometimes usually the long-arm statutes give you various circumstances under which courts will permit you to say, all right, they either do enough business or there's some nexus between their activities, even though they're in New York, and what's going on in Washington, D.C. Perhaps the fact that they, as New York officials, reached out to try to exercise their own jurisdiction over Donald Trump serving as president in Washington, D.C., that might give them some reason to believe that jurisdiction extends. But apparently none of it made any sense to Carl Nichols. They have a reverse problem up there, right? In New York, these 2 officials are suing or proceeding in ways that will, if it works out, will give them access to Trump's New York state tax returns, I guess. That's what they're looking for. And he's, of course, a New York resident. And so that would be enough for New York courts to establish jurisdiction, which may be the reason why Trump is announcing that he's going to give up his residence as a New York state citizen and move to Florida and make Mar-a-Lago his personal residence full-time. I guess in the hopes that these New York officials won't any longer have personal jurisdiction over him. I don't know whether that's going to work. But at any rate, that's why the New York officials are able to pursue Trump even though he's in Washington. He has a connection to New York. Trump then sues in Washington. Why sue in Washington instead of suing in New York? Well, for one thing, he's looking to distance himself from New York. If you go to New York and you sue there and say, I want to sue to stop the Attorney General and state tax official from looking at my taxes, and my claim is that they don't have jurisdiction over me because I'm living in Washington, D.C., the court will say, well, you're here now suing. So unless you're saying we don't have jurisdiction to take your case, suing them, then you've got no reason to say they don't have the right to sue you. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, that sucks. Also, of course, he will not have appointed the judges in New York, but there's some chance that his case, if filed in D.C., would land before a judge that he appointed. And Donald Trump, because he's an idiot, assumes that the judge will think to himself, well, I know which side my bread is buttered on. He appointed me. I wouldn't be a judge if it wasn't for him. I owe him a positive, favorable result in this case. Unfortunately for Trump, I guess he also forgot the part where Carl Nichols gets to keep that job for life no matter what he does. So very interesting. Anyway, so basically he's saying, yeah, I can't actually help you with your suit in federal court to stop these New York officials from doing this to you because they're in New York. Sorry. So just another fantastic understanding of the law by genius Donald Trump. Stable genius indeed. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. And yes, it occurs to me that what we really need to do here, before I keep threatening to go back to the AP article on Rick Perry, well, just as well, because it really needs more digestion and probably would be better presented as digested talking points than reading the rest of the article at this point. But I do have this other piece that we began with and was very promising, and we never really returned and finished the Salon piece from Roger Sullenberger, who is Rudy Giuliani's friend Charles. An accidental text may have outed his identity. We got as far as reporting, one, reminding everybody of the supposedly butt-dialed. And by the way, I keep saying that, supposedly. I've seen some speculation out there on Twitter that Giuliani's butt dials and texting of passwords might be, in fact, some kind of strange setup. I really don't understand what he thinks he would be getting out of it, beyond the suggestion that he's distracting reporters from something, but he puts them on the scent of an even worse story. So I don't really know. He's just a bad lawyer and bad communicator in general, Rudy Giuliani. He's terrible. If he turns out to be crazy like a fox at the end of all this, I'll be really surprised, and I would love to know how this plays out. But it is a little bit unlikely that he'd be having so many stupid, technological gaffes one after the other, or especially as Sullenberger was reporting here, that the IT professionals he spoke with assured him, one, that this is almost certainly a password, and two, that there's no way of butt dialing that. And then Giuliani says, whoops, sorry, butt dial. It's a canned excuse for him. If it's not possible, then, or maybe that he doesn't know how it happened, or that's a better excuse than saying, yeah, I accidentally, cut and pasted my password for a thing into my text. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't want to admit to it. Anyway, the supposed butt dial, that's why I say supposed, that left the message talking about somebody named Charles possibly having a hard time with a fraud case. That, I guess, it sounds like Charles would have a hard time claiming that he had been defrauded in thus and such a case because he did no due diligence. And we didn't know who Charles was, and now the supposition is that Roger Sullenberger has stumbled upon who that person is. Right? So where did we get to? As he puts it out, at the time it was unclear who Charles was, but I think I might have found him. And I found him through all things in Giuliani's attempt to straighten up his media act. That's because in late September, Giuliani hired a communications director, We got this part out there, right? The new hire, 20-year-old Liberty University online communications major, Christianné Allen, class of 22 here, is currently the most solid connection between the work Giuliani's doing in Ukraine, the ongoing investigation into Parnas and Fruman, and a Long Island personal injury lawyer who, for reasons still unclear, reportedly paid Giuliani $500,000 in 2 lump sum loans on behalf of a scam business in the fall of 2018. So, as I thumbed through an Instagram account, and I guess it's Christianné Allen's, I found myself wondering why in the world Rudy Giuliani hired this woman who, social media maven that she is, documents everything that she does in ways that give us far too much information about who she's meeting, where and when, and how fortuitous her rise in whatever the hell you want to call it, Republican politics, Republican grifting, has been. A few weeks into my conversations with Giuliani, I got a call from a Tidewater, Virginia number. That would be, Tidewater area would be Virginia Beach, Newport News, Hampton Roads area, which is includes, of course, I think that's where Liberty University actually is. I don't know whether that's where her hometown is. But at any rate, this polite young woman told me I had been calling Rudy on an office line and wanted to know my name and affiliation. Right? They exchange names. He goes and looks up Christianné Allen. Who is this person who's calling from Tidewater, Virginia? It's not close to D.C., by the way. And remember, she's working for Giuliani now in his consultancy, Giuliani Partners, which I don't know where that's based. I don't know if that's based in Washington or in New York. But in either case, the Tidewater area is a good 3-4 in traffic hour drive from the Washington, D.C. area. So it's not a satellite office. It's not, I don't know, she may have been calling on her own cell phone from Giuliani's office in New York or D.C. I'm not really sure. But anyway, this is the tip-off that she's a Liberty University student or Tidewater, Virginia area resident, depending on what kind of line she was calling on. The connections between Allen and Giuliani first struck me as superficial. Why did Giuliani, a former U.S. attorney and mayor of New York City, the president's personal lawyer, and an untamed media presence, to put it charitably, hire a wildly underqualified pseudo-evangelical Turning Point USA social media personality to clean up his communications operation? The first red flag was Allen's experience. She styles herself as a jet-setting, gun-porning, right-wing Instagram influencer. Her online bios say she was a spokeswoman for the 2016 Trump campaign, but in reality she was a teenage intern. Oh, everything has moved around now on screen. There we go. Teenage intern with a thin record of spokeswomaning. It's a wild exaggeration. As it turns out, it's not detailed in this article, but as it turns out, I've read elsewhere, she was an intern for a Trump staffer, for the director of Trump's Virginia campaign. So the idea that she was an intern for Trump, which is what she tells people, is a huge exaggeration. But, okay. Most of her resume is. Allen also did social media for the 2018 congressional campaign of far-right Republican longshot Tim Donnelly, founder of the California Minutemen Party, who didn't come close to winning even the GOP vote. She volunteered for Virginia Women for Trump, and her bios say she now serves as on the Finance Committee for Trump Victory Committee, as many 20-year-olds do. Allen's LinkedIn omits her work for the Donnelly campaign, interestingly enough. Her LinkedIn page, though, has an anomaly. A 2016 summer internship Allen landed at a Long Island personal injury firm a long way from her rural Virginia home. We did get to this point yesterday, I think, just tried to rush through it. The personal injury firm is Gucciardo Law, headed by Charles Gucciardo, yes. Last week, Giuliani and Gucciardo confirmed to the New York Times that Gucciardo gave $500,000 to the former mayor through Giuliani's firm, Giuliani Partners, in 2 payments in September and October 2018. According to Gucciardo's lawyer, the payments went to Giuliani on behalf of Fraud Guarantee. This we talked about on Friday, right? A company co-managed by Giuliani's clients Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. Their work with Fraud Guarantee, whose mission statement says they help customers reduce and mitigate fraud, helped earn them a federal indictment last month. I'm curious what they actually do here with this. Okay. Athena tells me, by the way, that Liberty University is in Lynchburg, far from Hampton Roads. Okay, what's over down there? Is that Regent University? Is I think closer to Tidewater? Then I think that's the situation. Oh, look at this, a pop-up ad, just what we need from Verizon. Hey, congratulations! I won all sorts of things, everybody. Can we get back? Why is Salon really going to make it this difficult? Does Salon know that their content is being hijacked by these pop-up ads? I'm going to have to open this thing again and scroll down. All right. So, yeah, if Liberty University is in Lynchburg, it might be Regent University I'm thinking of that's on the other side there. And it may just be then that what that indicates to me is she may be from, I've seen her referred to in other articles as being from a rural Virginia home. It may be that she herself is from a rural area of the Tidewater region and has a cell phone number that tracks back to the Tidewater, but she may very well be in New York or DC and using that cell phone. Anyway, that's interesting by itself. The communications director calling on official business on behalf of the Giuliani partners, but not using their lines, using her old personal phone line. Maybe that. All right, it's not in government, so it's not going to cause a problem. But okay, yes, Regent University, the other weirdo evangelical university in Virginia, is in Virginia Beach. Got it. Okay, thanks for the production assistance there, Athena. Where were we? Gucciardo, yes. Oh, yes, right. So the first of all, fraud guarantee that helps customers reduce and mitigate fraud. But of course, they have no customers, for one thing. For another thing, what would these guys know about reducing and mitigating fraud? They're perpetrators of fraud. I think the only service they could offer you is, well, we are constantly perpetrating fraud. We, as if you hire us and you become our clients, we promise not to defraud you. So there you have it. We've reduced and mitigated fraud. 2 known fraudsters have decided not to defraud you because of your relationship with Fraud Guarantee. Ta-da, there's the benefit. I don't know what they do. Or else maybe it's like Donald Trump's claims. I know all the tax loopholes because I avoid taxes all the time, and only I can fix it, sort of thing. Anyway, they never actually explained that. Gucciardo's lawyer told the Times the funds were loans convertible into equity in the company. As the Times pointed out, though, Fraud Guarantee doesn't seem to have any clients or customers, and it's unclear why someone in Gucciardo's position, an experienced lawyer, would invest $500,000 in such a company. Per Gucciardo's lawyer, he did so because Giuliani was involved, and Giuliani was, quote, the first name in cybersecurity. He's really not. Giuliani isn't even the first name in Rudy Giuliani. It's Rudolph. But okay, fine. You want to think that's fine. But here, it's important just to pause on this part here that he really didn't do much checking into what was going on here, right? Because if he had, he would have seen that Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman have a trail behind them of companies that they've set up and been accused of defrauding people, and that they don't pay off on investments and they don't pay back loans or anything like that. And real due diligence would have showed you that lending them $500,000 was not likely to come back. And that may very well be, like, if at some point, if it was really a butt-dialed conversation, right, that Giuliani may be saying to whoever he's talking to, yeah, Charles, even though he's an attorney, an experienced attorney, he's going to have a hard time clawing back that $500,000 from us on the basis of claiming that it was a fraud because he didn't do any due diligence. I mean, he invested this money without checking into the background. That's one of the things you're supposed to do in making an investment, the basic requirement of the investor. Did you, look around to see whether there was any hints that you were being defrauded? If you did and you legitimately find that there are none, well, your case can proceed, but it can't always proceed when the judge finds, you went into this with your eyes open, that these guys are either that these guys were fraudsters and you did it anyway, or you went into it with your eyes closed, in which case you deserve to lose your money because you're responsible for checking out what you're investing in. So is that what he was really inadvertently revealing? I'm going to get to keep this money because Charles made a huge mistake. He did no due diligence in this case, which would be really interesting if that's what he was saying. If I guess it would get back to Gucciardo. If he's the kind of guy who would be sensitive about losing $500,000 this way. He may not be. He might just have been about, I'm going to give Giuliani $500,000 because reasons. I have a deal with him. I want to bribe him. I think it'll come back to me in spades. Not certain what it is, but if it wasn't the case and it really was something that he was at least investing in, it's going to be interesting when that gets back to him that in casual conversation when he's not around, Giuliani, who he considered a friend, in fact muses openly about how easy it's going to be to continue to steal this $500,000 from his buddy Gucciardo. Anyway, in a conversation, the lawyer who represents Gucciardo, his name here is Stephen it's either the Italian pronunciation would be, I guess, Stephen Lamagna, but unless he goes by Lamagna, which I doubt if he's up in New York, he might be going with the Lamagna pronunciation. So Lamagna told the reporter here, Mr. Gucciardo's investment in the company was and remains a loan pursuant to executed promissory notes. This means Gucciardo hasn't been repaid and could sue if he believes he's been defrauded. Parnas once pursued a similar scam and still hasn't paid his investors back, we'll include in here, despite a court ruling against him. So another strong hint that maybe what Giuliani was saying here is that if he feels like he has been defrauded, he could sue, but he'd have a hard time winning the suit because he didn't do any due diligence. As for Giuliani's relationship with Gucciardo, he told me, Charles is a good man. The loan is due in mid-2020, and I am certain it will be honored as a conversion to stock or both. Both what? I don't know. Or satisfied as he desires. It is currently not clear whether a fraud guarantee public offering is in the works. Of course it's not. Charles is my friend, Giuliani added, and he knows it will be done honorably. Or he doesn't care how it's done. It was just a lump sum payment to Giuliani for nothing, who, as other writers have pointed out, was in the middle of a nasty divorce at the time, and it might in fact just be an opportunity to bolster his finances. Here's $500,000 that your ex-wife cannot get her hands on in the divorce proceedings because I gave it to your partnership. And that could be all it is. But why involve Parnas and Fruman at all? I don't know. The first name in cybersecurity may or may not be Giuliani, but the first name in Gucciardo law, of course, is the same one Giuliani believed would have a hard time with fraud in the voicemail, Charles. Strangely enough, we still don't know how Gucciardo, Giuliani, and Parnas all met. The only thing that binds the group together other than money is, oddly enough, Christianné Allen. Facebook posts show Gucciardo met Allen at a 2015 Stanford University law seminar for high school students, where she impressed him. Allen said in an Instagram story that she, quote, did high school online, which no one knows what that means. Like, homeschooled, yes, but, did you really do anything? We don't know. Liberty University, by the way, sells packages of... I'm back into the Verizon thing here. Anyway, dang, I guess I'm going to have to go back. Maybe I'll have to read out of the pocket version of this so that this doesn't happen again. What an annoyance. Okay, so she did high school online. I was saying the Liberty University sells homeschool, high school curriculum packages, which they, make money on. And I assume then that Liberty University would be a place that would accept you to an accredited university program based on your completion of the high school curriculum they sold you, whether, and probably whether you really completed it or not. If you paid them the money for the high school program and then tell them, yep, I graduated high school and I'm looking to get admitted to Liberty University, and I guess maybe you take the standardized tests or something. Maybe you don't. I mean, it's Liberty University's call, I guess, as a private institution, what they want to do. If they feel like admitting you to the university, I guess that's up to them. And I'm sure they charge you plenty of money for that too, and everybody's happy. You get to pretend you graduated a real high school and a real university, and you have a pipeline to grifting as a Republican for the rest of your life. Everybody comes out happy. Nobody loses. No, I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody that does high school online, goes to Liberty University, then goes out in the real world and tries to get a real job at a place and finds out I'm totally underprepared. I don't know. Speculation on my part. Facebook posts show, right back to the start of this paragraph, that they met at the Stanford University Law Seminar for high school students, which, what is that? I don't know. How did that work out? I'm not sure. Stanford University, I'm sure you're aware, is in California, not Virginia, which is where she's from. This is 2015, at which point she is 16 years old, I think, and living in, presumably, we've concluded, the Tidewater area of Virginia, and yet finds herself at a Stanford University Law Seminar for high school students. Not sure why they even need to have that, but they do have it. The Facebook story actually posted by Gucciardo is that his son is at this Stanford Law School seminar for high school students, which, I'm sure it's a valuable thing or whatever. And Gucciardo's son is attending. I don't know why or how he comes to be interested in it. This is interesting because Gucciardo's post says, my son is taking a trial training program at a Stanford Law School. I mean, isn't it the Stanford Law School, I guess? I showed up without his knowledge to give a lecture on medical malpractice. You can imagine the rest. So cool. Now, here again, I don't know if I think his son appears to be about the age of Christianné Allen and all this. So if they're both 16, how does Gucciardo's 16-year-old son from Massapequa, New York, get to a seminar at Stanford Law School without knowing that his father is also going there? Although I guess he could say, I'll go with you. I'll take you. Yeah, okay, I can imagine it. I'll take you to California. I got some business to do. I'll be working. You go to the seminar. But wink, wink, I'm actually speaking at the seminar. Okay, I can make that work out. How does Christianné Allen get there? I don't know. She's homeschooling. She reads about this thing. She must come from some money. Convinces her parents, let me go to Stanford for this thing. She goes and does it. I guess while she's there, maybe that's when she makes some contact with that California candidate from the Minutemen Party. Who knows? Anyway, after this thing, apparently Christianné Allen is shown in some of the pictures. She's right up front. She sits in the front row in her skirt and manages to get front and center in Charles Gucciardo's pictures of the audience. Okay, maybe coincidence, right? Now, apparently he impresses her, or rather, she impresses him in this seminar. It says so right in the story. Gucciardo met Allen at this seminar where she impressed him. Allen said in an Instagram story that she did high school online. That's where we learned that. In the photos posted on Facebook by Gucciardo, Allen appears in the front row of a lecture hall and then with her arm around Gucciardo's son. Okay, it's actually Gucciardo's son with his arm around her. Her other arm is not visible. We don't know where it is. Allen interned at Gucciardo's firm the following year. Again, at 16. She's from Virginia. She's interning according to her LinkedIn page, she's interning at Gucciardo's law firm, address of which is given as Massapequa, New York. As it turns out from other people's research, Gucciardo's firm maintains offices in Manhattan and in Mineola, the county seat of, is it Nassau? I guess Nassau County seat on Long Island. But no offices were listed in Massapequa. Massapequa is where his home is. It's odd, therefore, and perhaps awkward, that this 16-year-old girl leaves home to go intern at the law offices in Massapequa, which is not where the offices are, but is where his house is. I find that weird, but maybe she just got lost and didn't know where she was. She was in Mineola. She thought it was Massapequa. Anyway, Allen interns at Gucciardo's firm the following year and appeared with him at a pro-Trump event that October at Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., where Gucciardo gave a lengthy speech. It should also be mentioned, I have seen it on YouTube, Allen herself gave, I don't know if we could call it lengthy, but also gave a speech at this event in October. All of it is on YouTube. When it said earlier in the story that she was, interning with or working with Women for Trump or whatever, this event was allegedly sponsored by a group that grew out of that called Moms for Trump. It was basically the same group. If you ever get a chance, maybe I'll include a link, note to self, Scott, really, that I should perhaps include a link to the YouTube page that has video of her speech and Gucciardo's speech. It is a crap show of an event, quite honestly, up to par for the way most freelanced Trump events were handled. Trump's not there. It's just a collection of boring speeches by weirdo people who can, with the exception of Gucciardo and one other political candidate, can barely get through the speech. Just interesting. Anyway, after Trump's election, Allen tried to start a combination marijuana business / reality TV show in Nevada with her father, registered at a house. Neither venture bore fruit. I think we did get this out yesterday, right? After some travel, Allen attended another Trump fundraiser with Gucciardo at Trump International, held for major donors to the America First PAC in June 2018. As far as we know, the $100,000 a head event is the first time various members of the group seem to have met. Did we get all the way through this? Now I don't think so, right? But, okay. I think we hit some of the highlights. $100,000 a head event. The first time, as far as we know, that various members of the group seem to have met, even though their friendship developed extraordinarily quickly, right? Let's see. Parnas's son Aaron was also present. Aaron was the first person to comment on Allen's Facebook post announcing her job with Giuliani. After the Trump International fundraiser, Gucciardo donated $50,000 to America First. The next month, Parnas and Fruman traveled with Gucciardo to Israel, where they were photographed with Anthony Scaramucci, who said Parnas and Fruman were trying to rope people into their game on the trip. I've seen pictures of that. The video of that trip that includes Mike Huckabee and his band playing, I forget what, I think Sweet Home Alabama in Jerusalem somewhere, has since been pulled from the internet. Apparently bothers somebody that there are so many connections in that video. And apparently it's after this trip that Parnas pledges Giuliani the $500,000 payment, but doesn't have the money and gets Gucciardo to front the money. Parnas and Fruman then ramp up their work for Giuliani. In November of 2018, according to Giuliani, Parnas began introducing him to Ukrainian officials. Parnas and Fruman also made some more trips abroad, including reportedly trying to shake down a powerful oligarch. And then in April of this year, Gucciardo was given a Friend of Zion award at a Times Square event that also honored Parnas and Fruman. Big friends of Zion, these three are, I guess. Giuliani posed on stage for pictures. Allen announced her new job with Giuliani in late September, but Giuliani's Instagram account suggests she'd been involved in his social media operations since at least the end of August. An Internet Archive search shows that at some point between September 2nd and 5th, Giuliani's Twitter account deleted an August 24th photo of Gucciardo captioned, "A wonderful boat ride with Captain Charles Gucciardi, a great person." Allen joined Giuliani, according to her own page, I guess, on a boat with Daily Caller contributors in July, after which they dined at Scaramucci's restaurant. And then there are the drugs. Allen's Nevada marijuana business, Discovery Club, has since dissolved, and the alleged reality show, High Stakes, never got made. She did do a podcast interview about the experience, however, which has since been deleted. Coincidentally, though, the Parnas and Fruman indictment alleges the two of them, with the help of two associates, tried to finagle illegal pot licenses for a Russian billionaire via donations to political candidates who could influence marijuana laws in Nevada, New York, and Florida, which is where all these guys operate all the time. Their indictment alleges that they started the effort when Gucciardo made that $500,000 loan to Fraud Guarantee. This is going to go somewhere, and we're going to find out in the end, somehow, that Christianné Allen was in youth gymnastics with Maria Butina.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, do stay tuned. Of course, tomorrow the big hearings start. We'll have Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter. I don't know, maybe Joan will be too busy to join us with the hearings starting, but we'll be speculating about what might be happening in there, watching alongside. And in the meantime, you want to catch up on all the other news that I told you existed out there but couldn't get to? Justice Putnam will take you through that next.